I'm Joshua, 32, and this morning my parents called to tell me my grandfather was dead while he was sitting 3 feet away from me eating toast. Before I tell you about the most satisfying instant karma I have ever witnessed in my entire life, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I read every single one. Okay, let's get into this. It started at 7:12 a.m. You know that specific time of the morning where the world is still kind of gray, and your brain isn't fully online yet? That was me. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my grandfather's farmhouse. The smell of old coffee and burnt sourdough was in the air. It's a smell I've woken up to every single day for the past 3 years since I moved in to take care of him. My phone started buzzing against the wood of the table. It was that aggressive vibration that sounds like a drill. I looked at the screen. The caller ID said, "Dad." Now, I need you to understand something. My father, Anthony, does not call me at 7:12 a.m. My father doesn't call me, period. Unless he wants something or unless he's about to deliver a verdict. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. Not since I refused to let him sell Grandpa's vintage truck. I picked up. I didn't even get a chance to say hello. "Grandpa died last night," my father said. There was no emotion in his voice. No crack, no wobble, no grief. It was flat, cold. It sounded like he was reading a weather report or ordering a sandwich. "Funeral is Friday," he continued, rushing the words. "He left us everything. The house, the land, the accounts. You get nothing. We'll be there tomorrow to secure the property. Pack your bags, Joshua. You're done." My hand froze around my coffee mug. For a split second, my heart actually stopped. It's that instinctual panic you get when you hear bad news. But then my brain caught up with my eyes. I looked across the table. Grandpa Harold was sitting right there. He was wearing his favorite faded flannel shirt, the red and black one with the hole in the elbow. He was holding his own mug of coffee with a steady hand. He was alive. He was breathing. He was looking right at me with those sharp, blue eyes that didn't miss a thing. But here is where it gets crazy. I didn't say, "Dad, are you crazy? He's right here." I didn't say a word, because in the background of the call, I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. I heard my mother, Sarah, laughing. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't a sad, hysterical laugh. It was a bright, chirpy, victorious laugh. "Finally," she said, her voice clear as a bell through the receiver. "Finally, you're out. We can finally list the estate." The sheer cruelty of it took my breath away. They weren't just lying. They were celebrating. They thought he was dead, or they were pretending he was, and their first reaction wasn't to mourn the man who raised them. It was to celebrate evicting his grandson and selling his assets. I looked at Grandpa. He had heard it too. He has excellent hearing for a man of 82. He didn't look shocked. That's the saddest part. He didn't look surprised. He just looked resigned. A calm settled over him. A calm that doesn't come from ignorance, but from certainty. He slowly lowered his toast to the plate. He reached for a manila envelope that was sitting next to the sugar bowl. It was sealed. It had the logo of his attorney, Elena, stamped on the corner. He'd brought it to breakfast but hadn't opened it yet. He tapped the table with his index finger. Tap, tap. He pointed to my phone, then to the speaker button. He put a finger to his lips. Shoo. I understood. I hit the speaker button. "Did you hear me, Joshua?" My father barked. "I said you get nothing. Don't think you can squatters' rights your way out of this. I've already contacted the bank." "I heard you," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. I was shaking internally, pure rage vibrating in my chest, but I kept it down. "So, he's gone. Passed in his sleep?" My mother chimed in. She sounded like she was smiling. "A massive stroke. Very sudden. The nursing home called us 10 minutes ago." The nursing home. They didn't even know where he was. Grandpa hasn't been in a nursing home for 3 years. He's been here with me. They were lying so brazenly, creating a reality that didn't exist, purely to expedite the process of taking over. "And the will?" I asked, baiting them. I looked at Grandpa. His face was like stone. Ironclad. My father lied. Everything reverts to the only son. That's me. The house, the investment accounts, the cabin on the lake. Everything is ours. We're going to list the farmhouse by Monday. The market is hot right now. We're going to buy that Rolls-Royce Ghost, Tony, my mother whispered, but the speaker picked it up. The black one. We can put the deposit down today. Grandpa's eyebrows shot up. A Rolls-Royce. My parents, who always complained about being cash poor, while living in a McMansion they couldn't afford, were already spending his death money on a luxury car. Right? Dad said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We need to move fast. Joshua, listen to me. Don't touch anything. Don't steal the silver. Don't take the tools. We are driving up to the cabin tomorrow to take inventory before the funeral. If one spoon is missing, I will have you arrested. You're going to the cabin? I asked. The cabin was Grandpa's sanctuary. It was 3 hours north, filled with his antique watch collection and his hunting gear. Yes, we need to secure the assets, Dad said. Now get off the line. We have calls to make. The funeral director needs the body released. I looked at Grandpa. He was staring at the phone, his eyes watering slightly. Not from sadness, but from the stinging realization that his son was a monster. He reached out his hand. His skin was paper thin, spotted with age, but his grip on the table was strong. He leaned forward. He moved his face inches from my iPhone. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it, the moment of truth. Grandpa took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling in the flannel shirt. Hello, Grandpa said. Just one word. Hello. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. It was a gavel coming down in a courtroom. The silence that followed was heavy. It was thick. You could physically feel the air leave the room on the other side of the line. That silence, I wish I could bottle it. It was the sound of a carefully constructed lie smashing into a brick wall. But before I tell you what happened next, before the screaming and the panic, I need to take you back. You need to understand why I was sitting at that table, and why my parents hated me enough to laugh at my eviction. 3 years ago, I was living in Chicago. I was an architect, junior associate, working 80 hours a week. I was miserable, but I was successful by my parents' standards. I had the apartment, the suit, the career path. Then Grandpa Harold had his first stroke. It was mild, but it was a wake-up call. He lived alone on this farm. My father, Anthony, wanted nothing to do with the mud and the manure. Dad was a man who cared about appearances. He worked in mid-level finance, wore watches he couldn't afford, and leased cars to impress neighbors he didn't like. My mother, Sarah, was the same. They were the country club type, even if they were always 1 month behind on the membership dues. When Grandpa got sick, we had a family meeting. I remember it vividly. We were in the hospital waiting room. He can't live alone, Dad said, checking his phone. We need to sell the farm. The land is worth a fortune to developers. We can put him in Shady Pines. Shady Pines was a state-run facility. It smelled like bleach and despair. I knew Grandpa. Putting him there would kill him in 6 months. He needed his garden. He needed his porch. He needed his dignity. We can't sell the farm, I said. He loves that place. It's been in the family for 100 years. Well, who's going to watch him, Joshua? Mom snapped. Us? I have my book club. Your father has his golf league. We have lives. What about Connor? I asked. Connor is my older brother, the golden child. He was 35 then, working in consulting, which mostly meant charming people out of their money. He was Dad's pride and joy because he drove a Porsche, leased, and dated models. Connor is busy, Mom said defensively. He's building an empire. We can't ask him to wipe an old man's chin. That was the moment I snapped. They saw Grandpa as a burden, a line item in a budget, an obstacle to their inheritance. I'll do it, I said. My father laughed. You? You're going to quit your firm? You're going to throw away your career to play nursemaid? Yes, I said. I can freelance. I can work remotely. I'm moving to the farm. They didn't hug me. They didn't thank me. They looked at me with disgust. To them, stepping off the corporate ladder was a sin. It was a sign of weakness. Fine, Dad said, sneering. But don't come crying to us when you're broke. You're throwing your life away. So I did. I packed up my life in Chicago. I moved into the farmhouse. I helped Grandpa with his physical therapy. I cooked his meals. I fixed the roof. And slowly he got better. We spent nights playing chess, drinking whiskey, and talking about life. I learned more from him in 3 years than I did in a decade of school. But my parents, they stopped visiting. They only came around on holidays, and even then, it was just to inspect the property. They would walk around the house, eyeing the antique furniture, calculating the value of the silver tea set. Connor would show up, park his sports car on the lawn, and spend the whole dinner texting, only looking up to ask Grandpa if he'd updated his will yet. It was sickening. Last Christmas was the breaking point. Grandpa was feeling weak again. He had a tremors in his hands. Dad sat at the dinner table, cutting his turkey, and said, "You know, Dad, you really should sign the power of attorney over to me, just in case. Joshua here isn't good with money. Look at him, wearing work boots to dinner." Grandpa looked at me, then at Dad. "Joshua balances my books better than you ever did, Anthony." Dad turned purple. "I am your son. I am the heir. You're waiting for me to die," Grandpa said quietly. "I can see it in your eyes." They stormed out that night. Mom screamed that I had poisoned Grandpa's mind against them. That was 6 months ago. We hadn't heard a peep since. Until this morning. Until 7:12 a.m. They didn't know I had installed security cameras. They didn't know Grandpa and I had spent the last 6 months meeting with forensic accountants because Grandpa suspected Dad was forging checks. They didn't know that Grandpa was sharper than ever. And they definitely didn't know that when they called to gloat over his corpse. He was enjoying a slice of sourdough toast. Back to the phone call. Back to that silence. "Hello," Grandpa had said. I watched the phone. I imagined them on the other end, in their overly decorated kitchen with the marble countertops, freezing in place. "Dad." My father's voice came back. It was a squeak. A terrified, high-pitched squeak. The arrogance was gone. The coldness was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. "Dad?" My father repeated, his voice trembling so hard the speaker crackled. Is that you?" Grandpa leaned back in his chair. He took a sip of his coffee, savoring the moment. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He was terrifyingly calm. "Who else would it be, Anthony?" Grandpa asked. "Who else were you expecting? The coroner?" No, Dad." My father started stammering, tripping over his own lies. We got a call. Someone called us. They said you passed away." "Oh my God, Sarah. He's alive. It's a miracle." "Dad, we were devastated. We were just trying to hold it together." I watched my mother's reaction through the silence. I could hear her shifting in the background. Then, her voice came on, syrupy sweet, dripping with fake emotion. "Oh, Harold. Oh, thank God." She sounded like she was acting in a bad soap opera. "We were sobbing. We were absolutely heartbroken. We thought we lost you." Grandpa looked at me and shook his head slightly. He reached for the iPad lying on the table. He unlocked it with a swipe of his weathered finger. "You were sobbing?" Grandpa asked, his voice cutting through their performance. "Yes, uncontrollably," Mom cried. "Strange," Grandpa said, "because I heard you laughing. I believe the exact words were, 'Finally, you're out.'" Dead silence again. That was out of context. Mom shrieked. I was hysterical. Grief makes people do crazy things." "Cut the crap, Sarah," Grandpa said. The authority in his voice made me straighten up in my chair. "And you, Anthony, you said you got a call? Who called you?" "The nursing home," Dad blurted out. "I haven't been in a nursing home in 3 years," Grandpa said dryly. "Try again. It must have been a prank." Dad pivoted. "Some sick prankster called us. We were victims here, Dad. We were panicked. Grandpa tapped the screen of his iPad. He turned it so I could see. It was his email inbox. You were panicked, Grandpa repeated. Is that why you emailed my bank at 6:48 a.m. this morning? I saw the color drain from the room, even though I couldn't see them. I didn't. Dad started. I'm looking at the alert right now, Anthony, Grandpa said, reading from the screen. Urgent request from beneficiary Anthony Carter. Subject: death certificate pending. Immediate access required for safety deposit box number 402. Sent at 6:48 a.m. I gasped. Box 402. That was where the family bonds were kept. The bearer bonds. Worth serious money. You didn't wait for a doctor, Grandpa continued, his voice hardening. You didn't call Joshua to check. You didn't drive up here. You emailed the bank to get your hands on the bonds before my body was even cold. And then you called my grandson to kick him out. Dad, listen, we have debts, Dad yelled, his facade cracking. We needed to secure the assets before the government froze them. We were doing it for the family. For the family? I spoke up for the first time since the hello. Or for the Rolls-Royce ghost? Shut up, Joshua, Dad screamed. This is between me and my father. You poisoned him. You set this up. I heard you, Anthony, Grandpa said. I heard you talking about the deposit. You need the money today, don't you? Did you already spend it? Did you borrow against my inheritance? The silence on the other end gave us the answer. They had. They were leveraged up to their eyeballs, banking on Grandpa kicking the bucket to pay off their lifestyle. We put a deposit down, Dad whispered, defeated. If we don't transfer the balance by noon, we lose the car. And the financing, Dad, please, it's just a misunderstanding. We love you. You love my money, Grandpa corrected. And as of this morning, you have access to neither. What do you mean? Mom's voice was sharp again. We are your power of attorney. We have the papers. I'm revoking it, Grandpa said. I have an appointment with Elena at 9 a.m. I'm bringing this recording. And I'm bringing the bank emails. You can't, Dad shouted. You're incompetent. We have a doctor's note. We. He stopped himself. Grandpa's eyes narrowed. You have what, Anthony? Nothing, Dad muttered. Just don't do this. We're family. We're going to the cabin, Mom said suddenly, her voice changing. It was cold again. Anthony, hang up. Call Connor. Why are you calling Connor? I asked, a bad feeling rising in my stomach. None of your business, Mom spat. If you're alive, Harold, then good for you. But we'll see who the law supports. We have rights. Click. They hung up. I stared at the phone. My heart was racing. Grandpa, what did they mean? Call Connor? The cabin. Grandpa stood up. He moved faster than I'd seen him move in months. He grabbed his cane. The cabin, he said, his face grim. They aren't just waiting for me to die, Joshua. They're looting the ship before it sinks. Check the security app. Now. I grabbed my phone and opened the Cabin Connect app. We had installed cameras there 2 months ago because of bears. My screen loaded. The feed from the front porch appeared. There was a truck parked in the driveway. A black truck. And standing at the front door with a crowbar in his hand was my brother, Connor. And he wasn't alone. He was with a guy in a jumpsuit. A locksmith. They're breaking in, I said, showing Grandpa the screen. Right now. I looked at the timestamp on the video feed. Live. Connor was there, 3 hours away from us, hammering on the solid oak door of the cabin. The cabin that Grandpa built with his own hands 40 years ago. The place where he taught me how to fish, how to whittle, how to be a man. He's got a locksmith, I said, my voice rising in panic. Grandpa, the collection. Inside that cabin, in a hidden wall safe, was Grandpa's vintage watch collection. Patek Philippe, Rolex, Omega. Watches he had collected over 50 years. They were worth easily $500,000. And the antique rifles. The deeds to the timberland. Tell your cousin to step away from the door, Grandpa said, his voice low and dangerous. I tapped the microphone button on the app. It allowed me to speak through the doorbell camera. "Connor!" I shouted into my phone. "Get away from the door!" On the screen, I saw Connor jump. He looked around wildly. He was wearing a designer leather jacket and sunglasses, looking like he was on a GQ shoot instead of a burglary. "Who said that?" Connor yelled. "It's Joshua," I said. "I can see you. I'm recording you. Get off the porch." Connor walked right up to the camera. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked hungover or desperate. "Open the damn door, Josh," he screamed. "I know you changed the codes. Mom called me. She said the old man is dead. I'm here to secure the valuables so you don't steal them." "He's not dead, you idiot," I yelled back. "He's sitting right here." "Liar," Connor spat. "Mom said you'd say that. She said you'd try to trick me." "Mike, drill it. Drill the lock." The locksmith, Mike, looked hesitant. He looked at the camera, then at Connor. Buddy, if there's someone on the camera, I'm paying you triple," Connor screamed. "Drill it. It's my house. My inheritance." Grandpa reached out and took the phone from me. He held it up to his face. "Connor," Grandpa said. His voice was projected through the tiny speaker on the porch, 300 miles away. Connor froze. He recognized that voice. It was the voice that had told him bedtime stories. The voice that had scolded him when he crashed his first car. "Gee, Grandpa," Connor stammered, looking at the camera lens. "You have 5 seconds to get off my porch," Grandpa said. "Or I call the sheriff." You're alive?" Connor looked confused. Then his face twisted into a sneer. "So what? You're senile. Mom says you're crazy. She says you don't know what you're doing. I have a work order here. I'm the executor." "I am not dead," Grandpa said firmly. "And you are not the executor. You are a trespasser. I'm taking what's mine," Connor yelled, losing control. He grabbed the crowbar from the ground. "You promised me those watches. You promised me the Patek when I graduated. You gave it to him, to the loser architect." He hadn't. The watches were still in the safe. But Connor's entitlement ran so deep he believed his own lies. He swung the crowbar. Crack. He hit the door frame. Splinters flew. "Mike, get the door open or I'm not paying you," Connor screamed. The locksmith backed away, putting his hands up. "I'm out, man. This is domestic. I'm not going to jail for this." Mike started walking back to his van. "Coward," Connor yelled. He started hitting the door again. Bam, bam. "Call Miller," Grandpa said to me. He handed the phone back. Sheriff Miller. He was Grandpa's old fishing buddy. They played poker every Tuesday. I dialed 911 but asked to be patched through to the local sheriff's direct line in that county. "Sheriff's office. This is dispatcher Stacy." "Stacy, it's Joshua Carter. Harold Carter's grandson." "Oh, hi Joshua. How's Harold doing?" "He's fine, Stacy. But we have a break-in in progress at the cabin. It's my brother, Connor. He's armed with a crowbar and he's trying to smash the door down. We have it on video." "Connor." Stacy sounded disappointed. "Again? All right, sweetie. Miller is on patrol near the lake. I'll send him over. Is Harold there?" "I'm here, Stacy," Grandpa said loud enough for the phone to pick up. "Tell Miller to bring the cuffs." "Will do, Harold." I looked back at the screen. Connor was in a frenzy. He was kicking the door now. "I need that money," he was screaming. "I owe people, you old bat. I need those watches." "He owes people," Grandpa muttered. "Gambling. I told you. We need to go," I said. "We need to get to Elena's office. If they are this desperate, they are going to try something legal next." Dad mentioned a doctor's note. Grandpa nodded. He stood up, smoothing down his flannel shirt. He grabbed his hat. "Let's go," he said. "Get the truck." Not the sedan. The truck. We walked out into the crisp morning air. My heart was pounding. My family was imploding in real time. My brother was committing a felony on camera. My parents were committing fraud. And all for what? For money they hadn't earned. I helped Grandpa into the passenger seat of his 1978 Ford F-150. He refused to drive anything else. "Are you okay?" I asked him as I started the engine. He looked out the window at the fields he had plowed for 40 years. "I have no son," he said softly. "Not anymore." It broke my heart, but it also steeled my resolve. We drove out of the long driveway, dust kicking up behind us, heading toward town, heading toward the lawyer, heading toward war. We arrived at Elena's office at 8:55 a.m. Elena was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had handled Grandpa's estate for decades. She looked like a shark in a silk blouse. When we walked in, the receptionist looked up, eyes wide. "Mr. Carter." "Oh, thank goodness," she said. "Your son, Anthony. He called 3 times this morning. He sent over a fax. He said you were dead." Grandpa finished the sentence. "I've heard. He sent a death certificate request," the receptionist whispered. "And something else. Elena is waiting for you." We went into the conference room. Elena was standing by the window, reading a document. She turned when we entered. "Harold," she said, nodding. She didn't hug him. She wasn't the hugging type. "You look remarkably healthy for a corpse." "I try my best," Grandpa said, sitting down heavily. "What did they send, Elena?" Elena slid a file across the mahogany table. "Your son and his wife have been busy," she said. "They filed an emergency petition this morning at 8 a.m. Ex parte, meaning without you present." I looked at the document. "Emergency petition for temporary guardianship." "Guardianship?" I asked. "Like, for a child?" "For an incapacitated adult," Elena corrected. "Read the attachment." I flipped the page. My stomach dropped. It was a medical affidavit signed by a Dr. Evans, a doctor Grandpa had never seen. Patient, Harold Carter. Diagnosis, advanced dementia, Alzheimer's type. Prognosis, patient is nonverbal, aggressive, and unable to manage financial affairs. Patient is currently being isolated by grandson, Joshua Carter, who is suspected of undue influence. "This is a lie," I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. "Nonverbal? Aggressive? He's sitting right here." "It doesn't matter if it's a lie if the judge signs it," Elena said coolly. "They are trying to freeze your assets, Harold. They want to take control of the bank accounts before you can prove you're alive, or at least before you can prove you're sane. They argue that even if you aren't dead, you are mentally gone, and Joshua is manipulating you. That's why they wanted me to stay at the farm," I realized. "Why Dad told me not to touch anything. They wanted to trap me there while they got the court order." "Exactly," Elena said. "But they made one mistake." "What's that?" Grandpa asked. "They didn't expect you to walk into my office." Just then, there was a commotion in the lobby. I heard shouting. "I demand to see her. I know he's in here. You're hiding him." It was Dad and Mom. The door to the conference room burst open. Anthony and Sarah stood there. They looked disheveled. Dad was sweating. Mom's mascara was slightly smudged. They had clearly driven here at breakneck speed. "There he is." Mom pointed a manicured finger at Grandpa. "Harold." "Oh, thank God you're okay. Come with us, Dad. We're taking you to the hospital." "You're confused." "I am not confused, Sarah," Grandpa said. He didn't move. "You are." Dad stepped forward, trying to look authoritative. "The doctor said you have episodes. Joshua is confusing you. Come on, Dad. We have the car outside. We'll get you a nice room at the facility. We'll take care of everything." They were playing the guardianship card right in front of us, trying to gaslight him into believing he was crazy. "I saw the petition, Anthony," Grandpa said. He pointed to the papers on the table. Dad froze. He looked at Elena. That is a protective measure. To save you from him." He pointed at me. "Joshua is a leech. He's after your money." "Is he?" Grandpa asked. "Because Joshua didn't email the bank at 6:48 a.m. asking for access to the bonds." "I explained that," Dad yelled. "We were panicked. And Joshua, Grandpa continued, raising his voice for the first time, did not break into my cabin with a crowbar. Mom's eyes went wide. What? We know about Connor, I said. We saw him. On the camera. You spied on him? Mom screeched. He was just checking on the property. He was worried. He was screaming about his debts, Grandpa said. He was screaming about selling my watches. That's a lie, Dad roared. My son is a businessman. He's successful. Unlike you failed architect. Enough, Elena said. Her voice cut through the noise like a knife. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, please sit down. Or leave. Those are your options. We aren't sitting, Dad said. We are taking my father. We have medical power of attorney until this guardianship goes through. Actually, Elena said, smiling a thin, dangerous smile. You don't. She pulled another document from her folder. Harold signed this 6 months ago. It revokes all previous powers of attorney. And it designates a new agent. She pointed at me. Joshua. Dad looked like he was going to vomit. You gave it to Joshua? He takes care of me, Grandpa said. He doesn't ask for money. He doesn't wait for me to die. This is fraud. Mom screamed. He forced you to sign it. You're senile. Am I? Grandpa reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone. Joshua, play the recording. No, Dad said, stepping forward. Don't. I hit play. The sound of Dad's voice filled the high-end conference room. Grandpa died last night. Funeral Friday. He left us everything. You get nothing. Then Mom's laugh. Finally, you're out. Then the Rolls-Royce comment. We're going to buy that Rolls-Royce Ghost. We need to move fast. Dad stood there, turning a shade of gray I didn't know existed. Mom looked at the floor. The paralegals in the doorway were whispering. You recorded us, Mom hissed. That's illegal. Actually, Elena said, in this state, it's one-party consent. And since Joshua was a party to the call, it's perfectly legal. And very admissible in court. Suddenly, Dad's phone rang. It was a loud, jarring ringtone. He looked at it. He didn't answer. Answer it, Anthony, Grandpa said. It might be important. Dad looked at the screen. He went pale. He tapped answer and put it to his ear. Hello? We could hear the shouting on the other end. It was distinct. It sounded like wind and sirens. Dad. It was Connor's voice. Dad, help. They're arresting me. The cops are here. They have dogs, Dad. Do something. Dad closed his eyes. Connor. Mr. Carter? A deeper voice came on the line. It was Sheriff Miller. This is Sheriff Miller. I have Connor Carter in custody for attempted burglary, destruction of property, and looks like possession of a controlled substance. We found a baggie in his jacket. Dad dropped the phone. It clattered onto the conference table. Cocaine, Grandpa said, shaking his head. I knew it. Mom collapsed into a chair, sobbing for real this time. My baby. He's in jail. Anthony, do something. Dad looked at Grandpa. He looked at me. He looked at Elena. He realized the walls were closing in. Dad, Anthony said, his voice broken. Please, call Miller. Tell him to let him go. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. He's your grandson. He tried to rob me, Grandpa said. And you tried to bury me while I was still eating breakfast. We'll lose everything, Dad whispered. The car, the deposit. If this gets out, my clients, I'll be ruined. Grandpa looked at his son. For a moment, I saw pity in his eyes. But then he remembered the laugh. He remembered the finally, you're out. You made your choice, Anthony, Grandpa said. Elena, give me the pen. The room was silent except for the scratching of a fountain pen on paper. Grandpa was signing. What are you signing? Mom asked, looking up from her hands. Her makeup was running down her face in black streaks. This, Elena explained calmly, is an amendment to the trust. It removes Anthony Carter and Connor Carter as beneficiaries. Completely. It also places a restraining order against both of you regarding Harold's person and property. You can't cut us out, Dad shouted. But there was no fight left in him. It was a reflex. I'm your son. You ceased to be my son when you filed a legal document claiming I was brain dead, so you could buy a car, Grandpa said, not looking up. He signed the last page with a flourish. Harold J. Carter. He capped the pen. Now, Grandpa said, looking at them. Get out. Dad. Get out. Grandpa's voice boomed. It wasn't the voice of an old man. It was the voice of the farmer who had cleared this land with his bare hands. Before I have Elena add a clause that sues you for the legal fees of this guardianship nonsense. Dad looked at Mom. Come on, Sarah. But Connor, Mom wailed. We have to bail him out. We don't have the money. Dad snapped at her. The deposit. We sent the deposit. Ah yes, the Rolls-Royce deposit. As if on cue, and I swear you can't write this stuff better. Dad's phone buzzed again on the table where he had dropped it. He looked at it. It was a number he clearly recognized. It's the dealership, he whispered. Answer it, I said. Put it on speaker. Dad glared at me, but he did it. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone again. Hello? This is Anthony. Mr. Carter. A smooth salesman's voice came through. We have a problem with the wire transfer for the ghost. I sent it, Dad said. Yes, but the bank flagged it, the salesman said. Insufficient funds. And the credit check came back. Well, there's a lien on your house you didn't mention. We can't proceed with the financing. And per the contract, the initial holding fee is non-refundable. Non-refundable, Dad squeaked. That was $10,000. Standard policy, sir. You signed it yesterday. Sorry. We're selling the car to the next buyer. Click. Dad stood there. He had lost his father, figuratively, his son, to jail, his inheritance, and $10,000 in the span of 2 hours. He looked at me. His eyes were full of hate. Pure, distilled hate. You won, he hissed. I hope you're happy. You stole him from us. I stood up. I'm taller than my father now. I didn't realize it until that moment. I didn't steal him, I said quietly. I showed up. I took care of him. You could have visited. You could have called. You didn't want a father. You wanted an ATM. Let's go, Anthony, Mom said, pulling his arm. She wouldn't look at Grandpa. This place, it smells like old people. Even in defeat, she had to be nasty. They walked out. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence in the room was different this time. It wasn't tense. It was clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. Grandpa let out a long, long sigh. He slumped slightly in his chair. The adrenaline was fading, and the age was catching up. Are you okay, Grandpa? I asked, putting my hand on his shoulder. He patted my hand. I'm fine, Joshua. I'm fine. He looked at Elena. Is it done? It's done, Elena said. The trust is locked. Joshua is the sole trustee. They can't touch a dime. And with the recording and the police report on Connor, any judge who looks at that guardianship petition will laugh it out of court. Grandpa nodded. He looked out the window at the busy street below. You know, he said softly, when you hold a baby in your arms, you never imagine they'll grow up to wait for you to die. I didn't know what to say to that. It was a pain I couldn't fix. But he turned to me, and a small smile appeared on his face. Then you see your grandson, who gives up his fancy city life to cook oatmeal for an old man. He squeezed my hand. You get nothing from them, Joshua, he said, echoing Dad's cruel words from the morning. He was right about that. You get nothing from them. He paused, his eyes twinkling. You get your life back, and you get the farm. And he winked. We still have those watches. Connor didn't get a single one. I laughed. I actually laughed. Come on, Grandpa, I said. Let's go get some lunch. I think we earned a steak. Steak sounds good, he said. And maybe a beer. Don't tell the doctor. We left the lawyer's office. The sun was shining. The nightmare of the morning was over. The leeches were gone. We left Elena's office and the air outside felt different. It was crisp. It was clean. Tasted like freedom. Grandpa and I got into his old Ford truck. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just watched the city disappear in the rearview mirror as we headed back toward the open fields and the farmhouse. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was the silence of a man who had just put down a weight he'd been carrying for 20 years. We stopped at a roadside diner about 40 minutes out of town. It was one of those places with sticky vinyl seats and waitresses who call you honey. 2 ribeyes, Grandpa told the waitress. Rare. And 2 beers. I looked at him. Doctor said no red meat, remember? Grandpa cracked a smile. The first real one I'd seen all day. The doctor also said I was dead and incompetent this morning, Joshua. I think I'll take my chances with the steak. We laughed. For the first time in years, the shadow of my parents wasn't hanging over us. We didn't have to worry about Dad's snide comments about the filthy farm or Mom's passive-aggressive remarks about my career. They were gone. Legally, physically, and emotionally excised from our lives. But as we ate, I saw the toll it took on him. He looked older. Betrayal does that to a person. It ages you faster than time ever could. You know, he said, cutting into his steak. I always knew Anthony was weak. I made him that way. I gave him too much too soon. I bought him the cars, I paid for the mistakes. I thought I was helping. He paused, looking at his fork. I wasn't helping. I was crippling him. You couldn't have known he'd turn into this, I said. Maybe, Grandpa sighed. But Connor? That's on them. They raised a wolf and were surprised when it bit them. The next few months were a blur of legalities and vindication, but they were also some of the best months of my life. Let me tell you what happened to the empire my parents thought they were building. Crumbled. Fast. Without Grandpa's money to bail them out, and with the guardianship scheme exposed, the dominoes started falling. First, it was Connor. Sheriff Miller didn't go easy on him. The footage from the cabin was damning. Attempted burglary, destruction of property, and possession of cocaine. Because he had a prior record, a DUI Dad had paid to hush up years ago, the DA wasn't interested in a plea deal. Connor got 18 months. I went to the sentencing, not to gloat, but to see it finished. Dad and Mom were there, of course. They looked like ghosts. They had aged 10 years in 3 months. Dad's suit, usually impeccable, looked loose on him. Mom wasn't wearing her signature pearls. When the judge read the sentence, Mom let out a wail that echoed through the courtroom. He's just a boy. He didn't mean it. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly read the file on the fake death incident, looked over her glasses. Mrs. Carter, your son is 35 years old. He is not a boy. He is a criminal who tried to rob his own grandfather. Be thankful I'm not adding elder abuse charges to the docket. Connor was led away in handcuffs. He looked at me as he passed the aisle. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked terrified. For the first time in his life, Daddy couldn't write a check to fix it. Then came the financial apocalypse for my parents. Remember that Rolls-Royce Ghost? The one they were so desperate to buy. The deposit they lost was just the tip of the iceberg. It turned out, Dad had been borrowing from his clients' accounts to fund their lifestyle, planning to pay it back as soon as Grandpa died, and the inheritance hit. It's a classic Ponzi scheme move. When the inheritance didn't come, the scheme collapsed. He was fired from his firm. He lost his license. And then the lawsuit started. 6 months after the incident at the lawyer's office, I was driving through their suburb to pick up some supplies. I saw it. A foreclosure sign on their front lawn. The McMansion with the marble columns and the 3-car garage was being seized by the bank. I pulled over. I couldn't help myself. I watched from down the street. I saw a moving truck. Not a professional company, but a U-Haul. Dad was carrying a box out to the curb. He dropped it and books spilled everywhere. He stood there, staring at the mess, his shoulders slumped in total defeat. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just stood there. Mom came out. She was holding a lamp. She looked at him, said something sharp, and he just shook his head. I felt a pang of pity. just a small one. It's hard to turn off the love you have for your parents, even when they're monsters. But then I remembered the phone call. Finally, you're out. I put the truck in drive and drove away. I didn't stop to help. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary. I couldn't save people who were determined to drown everyone around them. Meanwhile, life at the farm was blooming. With the legal threats gone, Grandpa and I focused on living. I took over the management of the estate officially. I used my architecture degree to renovate the old barn, turning it into a wedding venue. It was a huge hit. We started making a profit, real, honest money from the land, not from stocks or schemes. Grandpa loved it. He would sit on the porch in his rocking chair, supervising the construction, telling the workmen they were doing it wrong, offering them lemonade. He was vibrant. He was happy. One afternoon, about a year after the incident, I was at the local hardware store buying paint. I turned the aisle and froze. My father was there. He was wearing a blue vest with the hardware store's logo on it. He was stocking shelves with boxes of nails. My father, the man who wouldn't be caught dead without a silk tie. The man who mocked me for wearing work boots. He was working retail for minimum wage. He saw me. He stopped with a box in midair. We stared at each other for a long 10 seconds. The store was quiet. "Joshua," he said. His voice was raspy. He looked tired. So incredibly tired. "Dad?" I nodded. He looked at my cart. It was full of high-end exterior paint and new fixtures. He looked at his own hands, dusty from the cardboard. "I heard the barn turned out nice," he said. It sounded painful for him to admit. "It did," I said. "We're booked solid for the next 2 years." He nodded. "Good. That's good." He hesitated, shifting his weight. I could see the wheels turning in his head. The old instinct to ask, to beg, to manipulate. "How is he?" Dad asked. "Your grandfather." "He's happy," I said simply. "He's healthy." Dad looked down at his shoes. "You know, Mom is working at the diner. The one on Route 9. She hates the uniform." He was fishing. He was waiting for me to say, "Oh no, that's terrible, here's a check. Or come home, we'll take care of you." But I didn't. "Work is good for the soul," I said. "That's what Grandpa always taught me." Dad's jaw tightened. The anger flared up for a second, the entitlement trying to claw its way out. But he swallowed it. He knew he had no power here. "Yeah," he muttered. "I guess. I have to go, Dad," I said. "I have a lot to do." I pushed my cart past him. I didn't look back. But as I walked away, I heard him place the box of nails on the shelf. It was a heavy, hollow thud. That night, I told Grandpa about seeing him. Grandpa listened, sipping his tea. "You know," Grandpa said, "I left a door open for them. Just a crack." "What do you mean?" I asked. "In the amended trust," Grandpa revealed. "The one I signed that day with Elena. I added a clause. The sweat equity clause." I stared at him. "You never told me that." If Anthony or Sarah could hold down a legitimate job, no scams, no borrowing, just honest work, for 5 consecutive years, the trust would pay off their mortgage on a small condo. Nothing fancy, just a roof over their heads. I was stunned. After everything, he still offered them a lifeline. "Do they know?" I asked. "Elena sent them a letter outlining the terms," Grandpa said. 5 years. That's all. Will they make it? Grandpa looked at the fire crackling in the hearth. "Anthony just might," he said. "He looked broken today, didn't he? Sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it properly. But your mother and Connor," he shook his head. "I don't think they have it in them." He was right. 3 months later, Mom quit the diner. She tried to sue her manager for emotional distress. She lost. She moved in with her sister in Florida and spent her days posting vague, angry status updates on Facebook about ungrateful children. She never completed the 5 years. Connor got out of jail and immediately violated his parole by trying to run a crypto scam. He went back inside. But Dad stayed at the hardware store. He kept his head down. I never spoke to him again, but I'd see him sometimes, driving a beat-up sedan, looking grayer, looking humbler. Grandpa gave them a chance to earn their redemption. He didn't give them money. He gave them a path to dignity. It was up to them to walk it. 3 years passed. 3 glorious, quiet years. We fixed the tractor. We planted a new orchard. We watched the seasons change from the front porch. Grandpa Harold didn't die in a cold hospital room, surrounded by machines. He didn't die suddenly in the night like my parents had lied about. He died on a Tuesday evening in October. We were sitting on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. The air smelled of dried leaves and wood smoke. He had been quieter than usual that day. He asked me to bring out the good whiskey, the bottle he'd been saving for a special occasion. I poured us both a glass. "Joshua," he said. His voice was soft, barely a whisper against the wind. "Yeah, Grandpa. Look at that view," he said, gesturing with a trembling hand toward the fields. "Better than a Rolls-Royce, isn't it?" I smiled, tears pricking my eyes because I knew. Somehow I knew. "Yeah, Grandpa. Much better." "I'm tired, son," he said. "I think I'm ready to sleep." "Okay," I said, my throat tight. "You rest. I'm right here." He reached out and took my hand. His grip wasn't strong like it used to be, but it was warm. "You were the good one," he whispered. "Not because you stayed, but because you listened." He closed his eyes. He took a breath, then another, and then silence. He slipped away just as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was peaceful. It was dignified. It was exactly the death he deserved. The funeral was 3 days later. It was held at the small white chapel in town. The place was packed, not with business partners or socialites, but with real people. The farmers he'd loaned tools to, the waitresses he'd tipped generously, the sheriff, the guys from the hardware store. Dad didn't come, though I heard he asked for the day off to mourn alone. And yes, Mom came. She showed up in a black dress that was a little too tight, a little too fancy. She walked in like she owned the place. She marched right up to the front row, the widow/family pew. I was standing by the casket. She looked at me, her eyes dry. "I'm sitting here," she announced. "No," I said softly. "You're not. I am his daughter-in-law," she hissed. "People are watching, Joshua. Don't make a scene." "You lost your seat 3 years ago, Sarah," I said. I didn't call her Mom. "The back row is empty. You can sit there. Or you can leave." She looked around. She saw the eyes of the town. These people knew the story. Small towns talk. They knew what she had done. She saw the judgment in their faces. She turned around, her heels clicking loudly on the floor, and marched to the very back. She left 10 minutes into the service, right before the eulogy. She came for the show. She left when she realized she wasn't the star. After the burial, Elena the lawyer pulled me aside. "He left you something else," she said. "A letter. He wrote it the day we signed the amendment, just in case." She handed me a thick envelope. Felt heavy. I waited until everyone was gone. I sat by his grave, the fresh dirt still smelling of earth and rain. I opened it. His handwriting was shaky but strong. "To my grandson, Joshua. If you are reading this, I am gone, and you are probably crying. Stop it. I had a good run. I know you worried about the money. You worried that having it would change you like it changed your father. It won't, because you know the secret. The secret isn't in the bank account, Joshua. The secret is in the soil. It's in the way the coffee smells at 7 a.m. It's in the handshake of a neighbor. It's in the silence of a clean conscience. Your parents wanted everything. They thought everything was things. Houses, cars, watches. They ended up with nothing because they didn't understand that everything is actually the people who sit beside you when the world falls apart. You gave me my dignity back, son. You gave me my last years. You listened when no one else did. So enjoy the farm. Drive the truck. And for God's sake, don't buy a Rolls-Royce. They get terrible gas mileage. Love, Grandpa. I sat there and laughed through my tears. Even from the grave, he was cracking jokes. I stood up and brushed the dirt off my knees. I looked at the headstone. Harold Carter. beloved father and grandfather. He listened. I drove home in his truck. The sun was rising on a new day. I had the farm. I had the memories. I had my self-respect. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank app. The trust transfer had completed. The numbers on the screen were astronomical. Enough money to never work again. Enough money to buy 10 Rolls-Royces. I looked at it. Then I put the phone in my pocket. I had work to do. The barn roof needed painting, and the chickens needed feeding. My parents were right about one thing that morning 3 years ago. You get nothing, they had said. They were wrong. I got everything. Wow. Just writing that brings all the emotions back. It's been a journey, hasn't it? If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Inheritance isn't what you get when someone dies. It's what you build with them while they are alive. My parents and brother were so obsessed with the value of my grandfather that they missed the value of the man. They saw a dollar sign. I saw a mentor. And in the end, greed is a blindfold. It blinds you to the consequences of your actions, and it blinds you to the love that is right in front of you. They chased the golden goose so hard they strangled it. There's a saying, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. My father thought he could chop down our family tree and still enjoy the shade. But life has a funny way of balancing the scales. I want to hear from you guys. What is the most important thing a family member has ever taught you? Not money, not gifts, but a lesson? Drop a comment below with your story, or just type good if you agree that character is worth more than currency. Your interaction helps this story reach people who might need a wake-up call about their own families. Thank you for listening, for validating my choice to stay, and for being part of this journey. Stay true to yourselves.